Well, the MCU's finally back from that snap. So Black Widow tells the story of Natasha on the run from violating the Sokovia Accords when she decides to take down the man most responsible for her haunted past. What's up, everybody? We've got a new MCU movie. Finally, it feels like it's been forever. We got so used to having like 4 or 5 of these things a year, then last year happened. It feels like it's been a while, hasn't it? Well, Black Widow is finally upon us. Not only is this the long-awaited MCU movie because we haven't had one in a while, this is actually a long-awaited solo movie that fans have been clamoring for ever since Natasha Romanoff made her debut in Iron Man 2. So is this too little too late? Is this an awesome reintroduction to the MCU? Is this yet another welcome back to the theaters? Let's talk about it. Black Widow has always been one of my favorite characters in the MCU. I really like Scarlett Johansson as an actress, and I think she's awesome in this role. And though I don't think that the MCU has fully embraced her as a character or ever really propped her up in the way that it feels like her character deserves for how badass she is, I've always wanted to see more of her past. I've always wanted her to get more of her due. And unfortunately, after the events of Avengers Endgame, spoiler alert, felt like we might not ever get that. Well, we finally do get Black Widow that does dive into her past. It does fill in some of the gaps of what was going on between Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War. But unfortunately for me, it does feel a little bit too little too late. But before I get into reasons why, let's talk about what this movie does well. And if you like spy action movies, this movie really does deliver that subgenre. If you're a big fan of the Mission Impossible movies, the James Bond movies, if you like a little bit of espionage, but a lot of action, that is what Black Widow is here to do. In a way, it almost feels like the MCU movie that could easily be plucked out of the MCU and just be its own standalone thing. I mean, if you just take a couple of lines of dialogue out, and of course everybody's knowledge that this character is an MCU character, you could almost, in an alternate universe, make this just a standalone spy action Scarlett Johansson vehicle, and it would survive just fine like that. And I kind of like that. You know, the MCU has always done good about kind of having these mishmashes of genres, not just being specifically comic book films, but you'll get like a heist film with some comic book elements, or a 70s thriller spy espionage movie with some comic book elements. And this one kind of feels like it's pushing that even farther, to the point where it fits very comfortably in the MCU, but it also fits very comfortably outside of it. Being that we're diving more into Black Widow's past, we do get to learn a little bit more about her upbringing, and with that, you get a great family dynamic, which to me is the standout of this movie. You get David Harbour here, you get Rachel Weisz, and you also get Florence Pugh as her sister, and that whole family dynamic of a family that's not actually blood relatives, very similar to the show The Americans. They're like planted in the US as all 4 agents that have to like act like a family. Their dynamic with each other, their dialogue, their chemistry with each other, that's the shining star of this movie. And it's almost a double-edged sword, because you like these characters so much and you like that dynamic more. You're like, damn, why can't we get more of this? Like, if you're gonna revive all the characters you've revived in the MCU, you now have my permission. Revive Black Widow and give us more of this family, because they are awesome. Specifically Florence Pugh. Now, this is an actress that I have grown to really have my eye on, for more reason than one. But wasn't a big fan of Midsommar, although she was great in it, but it was really fighting with my family that I really just started to take to her, to where everything that she's in now I'm interested in. And she is great here. She's the standout of this movie. And in a certain way, the movie almost feels like it's more of a backdoor pilot for whatever they're going to do with her character than it really is a send-off for Natasha's character. They give her a lot of focus. They give her some of the best lines in the movie. She has some of the better action in the movie. She has a lot of the aesthetic of Black Widow, to where I could easily see her being kind of a Black Widow replacement in future Avengers movies. But she also has her own attitude, to where she doesn't just feel like a copycat. She feels like she could actually carry her own character and her own arc very well. So she was really enjoyable in this. And I was also really intrigued with a lot of the answers that we were given for filling out the past of Black Widow. You know, we didn't really know a whole lot about her. We could fill in the gaps, we could create our own scenarios in our head, and most of the times I prefer doing that. But this is one of the few times where they go back and they fill in the blanks, and I was satisfied with the answers that they give, because they actually go pretty dark here. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a further segment, which I have some issues with, but I do like the fact that the MCU does not shy away from how brutal the reality of Black Widow's past is, and something that very much mimics Russian spies and things that we have seen in other stories before, like Red Sparrow and the Americans. A very brutal reality that they just kidnap women, kidnap these young girls, and strip them of absolutely everything and just turn them into killing machines. And the fact that she was able to break away from that and become an Avenger and actually save people and use the power that she has and the training that she's had and the trauma that she's had to undergo to cause good in the world, it almost just makes you love the character more for that alone. You could always fill in the blanks, but now that they've spelled it out, it just makes her that much more of a heroic character. Moving on to the mixed aspects, the main one for me is the humor. Now, this is much more positive than it is negative. There's a great running gag with Florence Pugh making fun of Natasha for her hero poses, which I actually got a laugh out of numerous times. It's one of the few running jokes in the MCU that I feel like they use the perfect amount of time and don't run it dead by the time they get to the last time that they use it. David Harbour is a great laugh out loud character. He's kind of the wannabe Captain America, and the jealousy and the envy of the Captain America stardom definitely comes through in some great lines. Where the movie falters with humor a bit is something that is just a recurring problem with the MCU, is that it undercuts really dark, dramatic moments with humor. And for me, I kind of wish that the MCU would learn to have some balls and just let it be dark sometimes. I mean, you have, for the better example, like Thor Ragnarok, major characters are killed and it's in a humorous way, so you don't even really feel the impact of it. You get here, and there's lines of dialogue, one in particular from Florence Pugh that literally is just the most vicious, brutal description of what happens to them whenever they are taken under this, spy society. And she's literally describing having her female reproductive organs taken out. But she does it in a cutesy way because it's meant to be a funny moment. When in reality, it's like the dialogue on paper is horrifying, but the tone in which they make her deliver it is a gag, and it's meant to be funny. It's meant to be this funny interaction between her and David Harbour, and in that moment, I just felt like this weird battling of tones, like, if you're gonna go there, go there. Don't undercut it with a weird joke. That is not funny. And now moving on to the negatives, and like I said in the beginning of this review, I feel this movie is a little too late. I feel like this would have been a really nice little side chapter, a little distraction from the main storyline if this had come out right after Captain America Civil War. I don't for the life of me understand, with how popular this character has been, why it's taken this long to get a standalone movie for her. It's not like they had to wait to come up with some amazing story. It's a story that, to a certain degree, they probably had in their head from the first time they brought her into the MCU. Why we have to wait until after the character is literally dead, canonically in this universe, to go back and tell her story, it just feels a little bit off. And the movie doesn't even really justify in any way taking place after her sacrifice in Avengers Endgame. I was wondering if at some point it was going to make some kind of story sense, that it was going to add more tragedy to it, or they were going to, dovetail in the end of the story that would come back around to her sacrifice, something that would make the placement within the release schedule make sense to me. And it never did. It never felt like it made sense to release it now. Now, there's going to be some people that's going to watch it and it's not going to matter. They can watch it after Captain America Civil War from now on and all is right with the world. But I just feel like the movie loses a lot of impact waiting this long. And it's almost to a degree where the film doesn't even really feel like this was a part of their master plan, like pretty much every other MCU movie feels like. It always feels like they pictured this movie 7 films ago, and it's very important. You can't skip it. Black Widow does not feel like that. It doesn't feel like a necessary, integral piece to the MCU. I think you could outright skip this movie and not miss a beat at all. And it feels strange because this is supposed to be like a love letter, a send-off for the character, giving her her due, finally giving her the spotlight. And I have torn emotions when I'm watching it because it almost feels like a slight insult to the character at the same time, that we had to beg and plead to get this fucking thing. And then in her own movie, she kind of feels like a guest. She has great moments. She has good screen time. She is the main star, but the action is not nearly as inventive or as exciting as her action scenes in previous movies, namely the Captain America films. And she is overshadowed by every single member of her family to the point where she's the least interesting lead in the movie. And like I was saying with Florence Pugh, as great as she is, this feels more like an advertisement for her future in the MCU than it does this love letter to Natasha, and that's why we're here. But even moving beyond that, one of the main issues with the film is that both villains are very weak. Again, a continuing negative that a lot of people can say against the MCU. They give all of the time and energy to their heroes. A lot of times, most of the time, if we're going to be honest, the villains always seem like afterthoughts. They're really afterthoughts in this. The main villain of the movie you don't even get to see until like the last act, because the whole plot of the film is trying to find this guy. So he really doesn't feel like he has any kind of presence or any kind of tension, or there's no kind of ticking clock in the movie that makes you feel his villainous presence. And then you have the Taskmaster, which has been in all the marketing, all the trailers, that you would almost assume is the main like physical antagonist, and that character just shows up once or twice until the third act, and inevitably whenever the Taskmaster reveals their identity, it has no impact because that person was in zero part of the plot whatsoever. There was mentions, and then it, ha-ha, I'm the Taskmaster, and everybody's like, okay. All in all, is this a good, entertaining MCU film? Yes. I don't think that the MCU has ever made a bad film. I mean, there's some that are certainly passable, there are some that are much better than others, but they're on a good streak to where, at the absolute worst, you walk away feeling like, okay, well that was an entertaining enough 2 hours. And that's kind of how I felt with Black Widow. Didn't make a huge impact on me. Definitely is not going to crack the top half of my MCU. It kind of fits right there comfortably in the middle, where it's competently shot, competently made, it's entertaining, it has good characters, it has all of those good elements that you want from an MCU, but it just feels like it could have done so much more, and it should have done so much more. So if you're a fan of the MCU, you're a fan of the Black Widow character, definitely check this thing out whenever it comes out, but don't expect to be blown away, don't expect it to be one of your favorite MCU films, and don't even expect it to be the perfect Black Widow send-off that this thing should have been. So if you're not an MCU fanatic, I'm going to tell you to hold off and stream it. So what do you guys think of Black Widow? Are you excited as hell about this movie? Have you been waiting for it forever? And for those of you that have actually seen the press screening for this, or if you're watching this in the future and you just saw it on Disney Plus at the theaters, did it deliver what you wanted, or is this a passable movie that should have been a lot better? Let me know your thoughts down below on Black Widow. I'm not going to be updating my MCU ranking with this one. I'm probably going to wait till the end of the year after we get a couple more movies, so don't expect that. But let me know your thoughts on this individual film, please. And what's the next blockbuster that you cannot wait for that's coming out this summer? Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button so you can check out all of my future content. We're going to be back to the Dexter reviews here very soon, so if you're a Dexter fan, definitely hit that subscribe button and check that out. We're going to be on season 4 here with a Dexter review. Thank you guys for watching, as always. And remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.